The first thing Eli Mercer heard was a child apologizing to a dead horse. "You held as long as you could," she whispered, both hands in the sorrel's mane. "Ain't nobody blaming you for being tired." The creek bed below him was all white dust, broken willow roots, and heat that smelled of hot iron and sage. A freight wagon lay on its side with one wheel turning slow. Flies worried the horse's eyes. The child kneeling beside it did not look up when Eli drew rein. She was 11, maybe 12, barefoot, dress torn. A length of trace rope was still knotted around her waist. One cheek was bruised purple. Her hair had come out of its braids and hung across her face like dry wheat. She kept smoothing the dead horse's neck as gently as if she were tucking in a sick friend. "You alone?" Eli asked. She sniffed once. "Not if you count him. Before I tell you what Eli did next, settle in wherever you're listening tonight and tell us in the comments where you're with us from. Then come right back to that creek bed, because the rest of Eli Mercer's life changed there." Eli swung down from the saddle. At 48, his knees complained every time he hit the ground, but he still moved quietly. The girl looked up then, and the sight of her eyes stopped him harder than the wreck had. Gray, watchful, too old already. "What's your name?" he asked. "Tansy Bell." "Who was with you?" "Sister Agnes. Mr. Pruitt on the wagon. They told me if anything happened, stay hid till the dust settled." Her voice caught. Dust settled. They didn't get up. Eli let his gaze travel. Dark stain near the wheel. Prayer book in the sand. Boot prints heading south. One horse dragging a tow. The wagon leather was marked St. Bridget's home. He crouched by the dead horse. "Anybody else come through after the wreck?" Tansy nodded. "3 men first. Then the tall one later." "The tall one have a name?" "Clyde Danner. Works for Mr. Rourke. He smiles when folks are frightened." That sharpened the whole day. Silas Rourke owned cattle, debts, half the county, and most of the silence around the other half. Eli touched the horse's neck. "Cold already." "What was his name?" "Bishop." Sister Agnes said he listened better than churchmen. "All right," Eli said. "Then we bury Bishop before the sun gets meaner." He found a shovel under the wagon and dug where the creek bank held damp under the crust. Tansy tried helping with her bare hands until he gave her his canteen and told her the living came first. She obeyed, but only after looking like she wanted to argue. They rolled the horse into the grave together. Tansy laid the prayer book over the chest. Eli stacked flat stones into a cairn. When they finished, she stood staring at the mound. "Ever talk to dead things?" Eli looked toward the horizon. "Only the ones I couldn't keep." That made her study him. "Then you understand." He did. There was a ridge above his place where 2 white stones leaned under a cottonwood. Nora and Lucy. Wife and daughter. Since then he had made a whole life out of not needing anybody. Now this child with dust in her eyelashes seemed to recognize loneliness like a shared language. He lifted Bishop's collar to throw it aside and felt something stiff inside the leather lining. Sewn in. Hidden. Before he could work it open, riders sounded faint on the rise. Tansy went white. They came back. Eli slid the collar under his bedroll. "How many?" "3 before. Maybe more now." He boosted her onto his mare, Rose, swung up behind her, and cut north through the wash instead of taking the road. Rose moved sure-footed among the stones. Eli kept them in shadow where hooves spoke less. Tansy rode rigid, fingers twisted in the mane, every sound landing on her like a strike. By late day, Red Hollow lay ahead. Eli meant to take her straight to Sheriff Talbot, until he saw who stood outside the livery. Clyde Danner lounged at the hitch rail in a pale hat and fancy boots. 2 riders flanked him. Silas Rourke sat near the bank talking to Sheriff Ben Talbot like the law was something he employed. "Keep your head down," Eli murmured. Too late. Danner spotted the bare foot below Eli's stirrup and smiled slow. "Well now, Mercer found what belongs to Mr. Rourke." Tansy went stiff as wire. Rourke turned his horse with easy patience. He was thick through the chest, silver at the temples, handsome in the smooth way certain wolves are handsome. "Evening, Eli," he said. "You saved us trouble. Poor child ran after a wagon upset. Court placed her under my care this morning." Sheriff Talbot shifted in the saddle. "That true, girl?" Tansy tried to answer. No sound came. Her hand found a fistful of Eli's shirt. Rourke spread his hands. "She's frightened. Let Danner take her somewhere quiet. Women will tend her." Danner stepped forward and reached for Rose's bridle. Eli caught his wrist. The whole street went still. "I found a child tied with trace rope beside a searched wagon," Eli said. I'll hear that order from the judge himself. The judge signed it this morning, Rourke said. Her father died in debt. Guardianship keeps the matter orderly. That was the easy road laid out in front of him. Hand her over. Ride home. Let the county rot in its own way. He could almost feel the familiar silence waiting for him if he did. Then Tansy whispered, so low only he heard it. Please don't put me back where that man can smile at me. Eli had not meant to matter to anybody again. But some choices step on a man before he ever knows he made them. He twisted Danner's wrist, yanked him off balance, and drove the butt of his Colt into the foreman's mouth hard enough to scatter blood and teeth in the dust. Rose lunged. Somebody shouted. A shot cracked from the boardwalk. Splinters jumped from the post by Eli's knee. He did not look back. He took the alley behind the mercantile, cut through Mrs. Keene's melon patch, jumped the irrigation ditch beyond the church, and rode for the hills while Red Hollow burst behind him like a kicked hornet nest. By nightfall, there was no going back to the life he had ridden into that morning. Eli's place sat 12 miles east of town in a fold of cottonwoods around a cold spring. One room, a lean-to kitchen, and a barn older than his grief. He lit no lamp when they arrived. Moonlight silvered the pump handle and the corral rails. Tansy slid from Rose and nearly fell when her cut feet touched the ground. He caught her, set her on the porch step, and cleaned gravel from her ankle with warm water and soap. She bit the inside of her cheek, but never cried out. You can holler, he said. I know. Then why aren't you? She looked toward the dark barn. Waste's breath. Not a child's answer. An old answer wearing a small voice. He fed her biscuits and salt pork, then turned away so she could eat without shame. When he looked back, she was staring at the wall beside the stove where 2 photographs hung. Nora in a stiff dress, trying not to smile. Lucy on a pony, missing one front tooth. Your folks? Tansy asked. Yes. Dead? Yes. She nodded. That's why you understood about Bishop. He sat across from her. Maybe. She folded her hands. Sister Agnes told me if anything happened, I was to tell a decent man 2 things and no more until he proved himself. First, Mr. Rourke wants my pa's spring because water means cattle and cattle means money. Second, she hid papers where bad men wouldn't look unless they were kinder than bad men usually are. Eli thought of the collar. In Bishop's tack? Her eyes sharpened. You found it. He cut the stitching and pulled free an oilskin packet. Inside were a deed, 2 statements, and ledger pages covered in neat columns. Names. Amounts. Interest no honest man would charge. One page listed Bell Spring transferred under a guardianship dated before the judge had supposedly granted it. Another carried payments to Sheriff Talbot. A third penciled future claims, including Eli Mercer's spring and acreage. That bad? Tansy asked. It's hanging bad. My pa used to say numbers are just tracks for money. If you know how to read them, they'll lead you to the thief. She leaned over the page and tapped one line. That total don't follow. He made the debt bigger than the parts. Eli looked at her properly then. You can figure? I can remember. Sister Agnes made me read ledgers out loud, so I wouldn't be scared of men hiding behind paper. A corner of his mouth moved. A good thing about crooked numbers is they limp if you watch long enough. That almost earned him a smile. The smart move would have been to run north before daylight, vanish into another territory, let the world keep the fight it had chosen. Instead, Eli rode to Doc Miriam Quinn's place before sunrise with Tansy wrapped in his slicker. Miriam Quinn was a widow with a tongue like wire. She opened the door with a shotgun. If you're dying, she said, do it inside. I hate blood on the porch. She took one look at Tansy's feet and bruised face and went cold as creek stone. Eli laid out the matter while she cleaned and wrapped the cuts. When she saw the pages, her mouth flattened. Rourke carried Mrs. Potter's note 3 months after it was paid, she said. I wrote the receipt myself when Henry kept books. She lost her place anyway. You testify? Eli asked. If I start, Miriam said, I won't stop at one lie. By noon the town had begun choosing sides with its eyes. At the mercantile, Mr. Beale polished the same patch of counter without looking up, but his wife slipped apples into Tansy's hands free of charge. Reverend Cole lifted his hat to the girl and stared at the road. Sheriff Talbot caught him outside the post office. You struck Rourke's foreman and fled with a ward of the county. I removed a child from a man she feared. Talbot pinched his lower lip, a habit Eli had known since they were young. Fear isn't a legal term. Neither is decent, but folks know it when they see it. Talbot glanced at Tansy. Something like shame flickered through him. Rourke's filed kidnapping papers. Judge Haskell will sign by evening unless someone gets proof in front of enough witnesses to matter. You have until tomorrow noon. Silas Rourke stepped from the bank, then with Clyde Danner beside him, lip healed crooked. Rourke's smile shone as if he had paid to polish it. Eli, child, good to see you upright. Tansy moved a fraction closer to Rose. Rourke noticed and softened his voice. No one blames you for confusion, girl. Your father left obligations. I am trying to settle them honorably. He left water, Tansy said. You just wanted that better. Color touched Danner's face. Rourke's eyes hardened. Children repeat bitterness they do not understand. That is why they require guardians. He looked back to Eli. Bring her to my office tonight, and I'll forget the scene in the street. Refuse again, and I'll take your land along with hers. I've lived without peace before, Eli said. Try living without property. Rourke walked away, boots spotless, reputation still shining around him. That was his real strength. Not only money, but the town's long practice of mistaking comfort for respectability. That night, Eli sat on his porch while Tansy slept inside under Nora's old quilt. The spring ran cold in the dark. In his lap lay the ledger pages, and in his chest the old argument. Keep your head down and survive, or raise it and lose what little remains. If you had been sitting where he sat, with a hunted child under your roof and half the county bending toward the man who wanted her, what would you have done? Trusted the badge or the bruise on her wrist? Courage always looks simple from the safe side of it. By dawn he had decided. Running would save them for a week and damn them for the rest. He needed whatever else remained at the wreck and every witness he could find. They would go back, gather what Sister Agnes had died protecting, and ride straight into town before Rourke sealed his lie in daylight. Tansy was already awake, the ledger spread before her. Her lips moved over the columns. What are you doing? Eli asked. If somebody burns them, I can still say them. You remember all that? Most things, if they're said twice. Sister Agnes called it the one gift men can't confiscate. That was the moment he stopped seeing only a child to protect and started seeing a partner in the fight. They reached the creek just after sunrise. Bishop's grave was undisturbed, but wagon parts had been dragged aside. Eli found fresh tracks over old ones. Danner's square-nailed horse among them. He motioned Tansy back and slid down the bank with his rifle ready. In the broken wagon box, beneath spilled beans, he found Sister Agnes's carpet bag. Inside lay a Bible, a comb, and 3 letters from widows Rourke had stripped of land the same way he meant to strip Tansy. A shot slapped the wagon board inches from his hand. Mercer, Danner shouted from the ridge. Mr. Rourke says hand over the girl, and you can keep breathing poor. Eli fired once toward the voice to make men duck. Ride. Hoofs tore sand. Another bullet split the wagon lantern and splashed oil. Eli swung onto Rose and drove her into the narrow cut north of the creek where only one rider could pass at a time. Tansy clung behind him with the carpetbag jammed under one arm. Shots cracked. A bullet burned across Eli's shoulder. He bit the pain and kept riding. Ahead, the cut forked. Left led to open flats. Right vanished into badland gullies. Right, Tansy shouted. There's a dry wash behind the butte. Sister Agnes made me map it from the wagon seat. Eli trusted her and turned. That saved them. Danner's riders thundered left and were gone while Rose picked through clay walls and cedar scrub. When they finally dropped into the hidden wash, the only sounds left were their breathing and the click of cooling guns. Eli slid down, blood soaking his sleeve. Tansy pressed both hands to the wound without being told. You keep doing that, he said through his teeth, and I'll start believing somebody raised you right. She looked alarmed until she saw the faint bend in his mouth. Then a small laugh escaped her. In the carpetbag's false bottom, they found a second sheet naming Talbot, Judge Haskell, and 6 others paid for delayed filings, forged interests, and forced sales. Even Eli's spring sat there in Rourke's future inventory, penciled in like a steer already branded. So that's it, Eli muttered. He's been planning my burying on paper before I had the courtesy to lie down. Tansy kept pressure on the wound. Then don't lie down. Short. Plain. True. One of those lines that stays with a person. They made it home by late afternoon, both horses lathered. Miriam Quinn arrived soon after, guessing trouble from distant gunfire and Eli's failure to keep ordinary time. She stitched his shoulder at the kitchen table, while Tansy boiled bandages and recited ledger figures under her breath like a prayer. "They'll come tonight," Miriam said. "Men like Rourke always choose darkness when they want to feel brave." Eli loaded rifles. "Then they won't feel alone." The first lantern hit the barn roof just after moonrise. Flame ran up dry shingles in one hungry rush. Horses screamed. Eli burst through the door as another shot shattered the water trough. Men moved in the pasture, half seen between sheets of firelight. Danner's laugh carried on the hot wind. "Get the child," Eli shouted. Miriam grabbed Tansy's hand. Another bullet tore through the wall and showered splinters across the table. Eli cut Rose and the mule loose and slapped them toward the creek. He fired twice from behind the rain barrel. A man cursed. Another lantern broke against the porch post. The barn roof groaned. "Cellar!" Miriam yelled. They ran bent double through sparks to the trapdoor behind the woodshed. Eli dropped last, dragging the hatch shut over their heads as hooves thundered into the yard. The root cellar smelled of damp earth, onions, and old apples. Tansy's breathing came quick in the dark. Above them, boots pounded. Glass shattered. A beam fell with a shower of sparks. Then Silas Rourke's voice drifted through the cracks, smooth as oil. "Mercer, Dawn's coming one way or another. Hand the girl up, and I may let the rest of you leave with your lungs." Eli put a hand over Tansy's mouth before she could answer. Smoke threaded down between the boards. Miriam sat against a barrel with the shotgun across her knees and eyes bright in the dark. That was the highest edge of it. Dirt walls. Fire overhead. A child trembling against his arm. Everything Eli owned except the spring and the graves burning down to nails. Toward morning the voices thinned. Hooves moved off. When they finally opened the hatch, the sky was pearl gray and the yard smelled of wet ash. The shack still stood, blackened at one corner. The barn was a smoking skeleton. Miriam went to check the spring line and give them a minute. Eli sat on an overturned crate because his legs had started shaking and he did not want Tansy to see. She sat beside him, stood on her face, braid half burned loose, and retied the bandage on his shoulder. "I lost the only roof I had left," he said. Tansy nodded. "I lost roofs before. That doesn't make it lighter." "No." She tied the knot and rested her hands in her lap. "But being left don't make you less. It just means you got more empty to carry." He looked at her then and felt something inside him give way cleanly and for good. He went into the smoke-sour shack and came back with a tin box. Inside lay Nora's brass thimble, Lucy's blue hair ribbon, and a little carved horse no bigger than a thumb. "Lucy used to set this by her plate at supper," he said, placing the carving in Tansy's palm. "Claimed no bad luck would come near while it was watching." Tansy's fingers closed over it. "You sure? I've spent 9 years keeping things for ghosts." He swallowed. Maybe it's time something living had them. Her eyes filled before she could stop them. "Nobody ever gave me something that used to matter to them. It matters still." She leaned her shoulder carefully against his arm. He let her. "Some doors open because they are forced. Others open because, at last, somebody knocks like they mean to stay. If this part of the story is finding you where you live, a like and a subscribe tells us to keep bringing these people to the firelight, because folks who have carried grief along while deserve endings that honor what it cost them to keep going." Miriam returned with Sheriff Talbot behind her, hat in both hands, face gray at the sight of the burned barn. "I should have moved sooner," he said. "You should have moved years ago," Miriam answered. Talbot took it. "Rourke's calling a public sale at noon. Bell Spring, Potter's Acreage, your place next. He means to make paper final before anyone can breathe. If the pages get read in front of enough people, Haskell can't swallow it now. Not after this." Eli's first thought was a rifle from the cottonwoods and a clean shot through the throat. That was the old Eli talking, the man who trusted distance more than daylight. But a bullet would leave Rourke dead and respectable. Ruin required witnesses. He stood slowly and looked from Talbot to Miriam to Tansy. "Then we take it to town." Red Hollow looked dressed for a lie. Men stood outside the bank in Sunday coats. Judge Haskell hovered on the courthouse steps. Silas Rourke had set a table in the square with deeds stacked neat and Clyde Danner by his shoulder. Folks gathered in rings, whispering. Rourke began before the noon bell finished. "Unfortunate defaults," he called. "Necessary transfers. The lawful reorganization of distressed holdings for the stability of this county." Then Eli stepped into the square with ash still on his boots, Miriam on one side. Talbot on the other, and Tansy Bell between them and Nora's clean shawl with Lucy's little horse in her fist. The whispering changed shape. Rourke's smile held by effort. "Sheriff, you found my ward." Talbot's answer came rough. "I found a burned barn and a child you were in too much hurry to collect honest." Judge Haskell cleared his throat. "This is irregular. So is charging interest before the debt exists," Eli said, laying the ledger pages on the sale table hard enough to make the ink bottle jump. Danner lunged. Miriam raised the shotgun. "Touch one, and I'll pin your hand to the wood." Nobody doubted her. Eli turned to Tansy. "Read the names." Fear crossed her face. He saw it and did not save her from it. Protecting someone did not always mean speaking instead of them. Sometimes it meant standing close enough that their own voice could find them. Tansy looked at the people in the square, Mrs. Potter clutching her gloves, Mr. Beale with his polishing rag, Reverend Cole bareheaded in the heat, and began. She read the figures from the pages first. Then Rourke slapped the packet off the table. One sheet skidded into the mud. Ink splashed across another. Tansy did not stop. She went on from memory. Date. Amount. Acreage. Payment to Talbot for delayed filing. Payment to Haskell for emergency guardianship. Forced sale of Bell Spring. Planned seizure of Mercer's place. Planned seizure of 3 more holdings not yet due. Her voice began thin and grew steadier with each line, because truth does that when somebody finally lets it stand up. Mrs. Potter stepped forward shaking and pulled a receipt from her glove. "I paid this note in March," she said. "Dr. Quinn wrote it herself." Mr. Beale spoke next. "Rourke carried my brother's debt past burial." Then another voice. Then another. Silence broke like river ice. Rourke saw the town turning and dropped the gentleman act in a single breath. "You little stray liar." He snapped at Tansy and reached for her. Eli moved before thought. He caught Rourke's wrist and slammed him back against the table. Danner went for his revolver. Talbot hit him from the side, and both men went down through a chair. Judge Haskell bolted for the courthouse. Miriam fired once into the air and stopped the square cold. Rourke was stronger than he looked and meaner than any strength deserved. He struck Eli's wounded shoulder. White pain flashed through him. Rourke tore free, snatched the ink bottle, and hurled it across the pages. Black spread over figures like fresh dirt. "Too late," Rourke snarled. "No one proves a damn thing now." Tansy stepped forward, knuckles white around the carved horse. "I can." And she did. Every line, every number, every false sum. She spoke them into the hot noon air while Rourke stared as if a grave had opened and started testifying. When she finished, the whole square stood still except for the horses shifting at the rail. Eli straightened through the pain. "You wanted paper to own people," he said. "Seems you forgot people can read." Rourke drew a little pearl-handled pistol from inside his vest. He got it halfway up before Eli's rope, thrown one-handed from 10 feet away, snapped around his gun wrist. Eli yanked. The pistol flew under the banker's wagon. Rourke stumbled. Danner tried to run, but Rose, tied nearby after finding her way home from the night before, kicked him flat into the dust. Talbot got to his knees bloody and furious and slapped irons on Danner first, then on Rourke while the whole town watched. This time no one looked away. The rest came with the force of things long overdue. Haskell resigned before sunset. Auditors froze Rourke's accounts. His cattle were sold to pay the stolen notes. Bell Spring went back into Tansy's name. Mrs. Potter got her house. Other families got land and their own names back. Eli kept his place, though the barn had to be built again from the ground. What changed most could not be entered in any ledger. 3 months later, first frost silvered the grass around the spring and half of Red Hollow rode out for a barn raising on Eli Mercer's land. Men set beams. Women laid pies under the cottonwoods. Miriam Quinn cursed anyone who measured poorly. Talbot worked without being asked. Tansy moved among them with a nail apron tied over her dress, reading the timber list and catching mistakes before they could turn costly. That evening, when the last board was set and lanterns glowed on the new barn walls, Eli found her by the spring. She had grown no taller yet, but some children change shape the first time they know they are staying. "You still talk to dead things?" she asked. "Sometimes." "Me too." She looked toward the ridge where Nora and Lucy rested, then toward the little marker they had raised for Bishop near the willow. "But not because I'm waiting on them to answer anymore." Eli rested a hand on her head, light as a blessing. "Funny thing about a home," he said. "Turns out it ain't the roof. It's the place where your name gets spoken like it belongs to tomorrow. Lantern light moved warm across the new barn boards, and beyond them the spring ran on through the dark, silver and faithful under the cottonwoods. Next time, settle in with us for the story of a deaf woman sent west because her brothers were ashamed of her, and the scarred rancher who learned to listen with his hands before he ever heard her heart. Until then, keep the fire low and the coffee warm.